When we speak of the culturally significant periods in history, it is impossible to neglect mentioning the Renaissance, and for a very good reason. Where and when it occurred, the landscape of cities flourished, and there was a huge outpouring of art still greatly celebrated today, as well as an academic trend that would go on to shape the modern humanities while furthering along the spirit of inquiry. Part of that we owe to the period's certain sense of possibilities. History was then at the cusp of globalization as we know it, experiencing freer commerce, the discovery of the New World, and many significant social reforms. Indeed, it was this very era of change that inspired the intellectuals of the Renaissance to consciously style their era as a sort of rebirth from the perceived drudgery of the Middle Ages. It is therefore very unsurprising to find linguistics in the Renaissance also colored by potential and renewal. Its growth was supplemented by the patronage system, which combined competition among various talented people and their discerning patrons to produce fertile, intellectual, and artistic hubs in the great city-states of Italy. More importantly, the patronage system was only one aspect of a much broader feature of the Renaissance, an unprecedented celebration of learnedness at the heart of its culture. Suddenly, being rich or powerful wasn't enough. One also had to demonstrate knowledge and good taste to be truly respected by one's peers. Not only did this give the rich incentive to partake in academia themselves and patronize the arts, it made being a scholar a lot more glamorous. And it wasn't just glamour that awaited a scholar, but better wages as well. Another significant characteristic of the Renaissance was the disappearance of the Great Social Divide, where the old status quo of nobility was being challenged by a rising bourgeoisie consisting of bankers, merchants, and artisans. Many were able to enjoy their education and the arts when they previously couldn't, and literacy rates were slowly but steadily climbing. This created for the invention of the printing press and the ensuing mass production of books an extraordinarily ripe market. The result was a dissemination of ideas previously undreamed of. The very first printings of the Bible in German vernacular flew off the shelves, and the printing press itself was a booming success, spreading across 2,500 European cities by the end of the 15th century. What this meant for linguistics was a newly urgent need to standardize and codify the vernaculars. The new wave of literate people, banded together by greater exposure to other civilizations and their common roots, didn't want to just read in the classical languages. They wanted a piece of their heritage in their books. This sentiment was reflected and driven by the great writers of the day. Dante, who wrote his Divine Comedy in Tuscan dialect, and Petrarch, whose poetry would later serve as a model in the construction of modern Italian. Naturally, having so many people wishing to read in French, Italian, and Spanish meant a need for uniformity in these languages to preserve communication, and, at a time when the Reformation was ongoing, a demand for vernacular translations of the Bible. Despite this surge of nationalistic spirit, the Renaissance intellectuals also acknowledged and gave prestige to Arabic and Hebrew. They recognized that these languages too had gone through their own detailed grammatical treatment. For Arabic, we may credit this to Sibawayh, the writer of Al-Kitab. It was the first comprehensive study into classical Arabic, containing findings such as the division of verbal tenses into past, present, and future, which would be preserved through the entire history of Arabic grammatical tradition. However, this new focus of attention upon contemporary languages did not affect the status of Greek and Latin. In fact, during the Renaissance, Greco-Roman scholarship was revitalized, with its philosophies being applied, expanded upon, and debated with newfound vigor. One pioneer responsible for this was Manuel Quirsoloras, who wrote Erotemata y las Cuestiones, the earliest basic grammar book of Greek in Western Europe. As the first teacher of Greek in Renaissance-era Italy, he had many influential and promising talents as students, who would go on to be the key figures in Greco-Roman revival. Given this rich mix of existing and dead languages now available to European linguistic studies, the Renaissance, quite predictably, gave birth to new theories and schools of thought. This was well exemplified in the Port Royal grammarians, who were a group of rationalists or believed in the existence of the innate idea within the human mind. They were also supporters of the concept of universal grammar, or the unity underlying the grammar in all human languages. In their efforts to uphold their philosophies, they studied Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and modern European languages, attempting to explain a combination of different grammars, and separated the 9 traditional word classes into 2 semantic categories. Their struggles with language universals as well as the adjusting of traditional definitions would echo across future linguistic movements and still remain with linguists today. This pattern of seeing our troubles wearing old faces and our interconnected world wearing a younger one repeats itself whether we look at the Renaissance as a time period or only linguistically. Perhaps our real lesson from it then should be how to spark similar intellectually energetic environments where they do not exist and how to sustain them.